there. Sure. Where are you sitting? Yeah, sure. Sure. Okay. Thank you. Good morning. May I ask everyone to now sit down? My name is Tony Lavinia. I'm from the Philippines. I'm from the Ateneo School of Government in the Philippines, as well as an advisor to the Philippine delegation to the Warsaw climate talks. I will be moderating this session, this side event we have today. We're calling it Getting REDD Plus Off the Ground, Challenges and Opportunities. We have, I think, an interesting couple of hours before us. If you have been following the negotiations, both here in Warsaw and before, you know that REDD Plus has advanced quite a lot in the negotiations, but have also been stuck in a number of important areas right now, mostly for political reasons, but also for technical reasons. But I've always said that because people have asked me, how come REDD Plus as an area of negotiation and as an area of responding to climate change, how come it has progressed faster than many areas of the negotiations? And I've always said, well, one is we have avoided north-south dichotomy or north-south politics as much as possible, and we've been very successful in getting people to have an approach of looking at it from a common interest point of view. But the other thing that's been quite unique with REDD Plus is the practice on the ground has advanced much faster than the political negotiations, and things have been going on the ground. I mean, and so it's in this context that the Center for International Forestry Research, of which I'm also a member of the board, has been doing a lot of research on the ground in REDD Plus and working with partners from different countries, from different organizations. And part of the thing we will do here in this event is actually to share with you our research findings. In any case, we have a very interesting group of speakers. For today, we'll start with Joanna Durbin, who will be our keynote speaker. I'll introduce her in a while. And we will also have then a summary. William Sunderlin here will summarize for us the CIFOR research on challenges. And I think the highlight that you would agree with me with this event is actually the sharing of experiences from different countries. We have colleagues, Renato Farias here from Brazil, Charles Meschak from Tanzania, and Wahjudi Wardojo of Indonesia. They will share with us what REDD underground experience has been and what insights and lessons we can learn from that. Throughout this session, we will have an opportunity first to ask clarificatory questions after every presentation, and then we will have a panel discussion. I'll field a couple of questions to our panel, and then we'll open up for discussions, finishing finally at noontime for us to go back to the negotiations or other things if you have other things to go to. So again, thank you, and let's begin. I will now call on my colleague, our colleague Joanna Durbin, Director of the Climate Community and Biodiversity Alliance, or CCBA, to deliver the keynote address for this side event. Joanna leads CCBA. It's a partnership of NGOs with a mission to stimulate land management activities that deliver significant benefits for the climate, local communities, and conserve biodiversity. She has quite a lot of experience in developing and managing standards for social and environmental impacts of REDD Plus activities, including the CCB standards for projects and the REDD Plus social environmental standards, or REDD Plus SES as we in this field know, for government-led REDD Plus programs. Joanna has many years, 20 years in fact, of experience in community-based institutions and good governance for effective biodiversity conservation and sustainable development, particularly in Madagascar. So, Joanna? Yeah, we'd have to move. So I think can we have an extra chair there, and then we just move, so that otherwise we'll have to, Wahjudi will have to move every time there's a speaker. So we don't want to do that. So can I ask the colleagues from CIFOR to have one extra seat here?
Yes, thank you very much. So we've clearly come some way down the track, as Tony was saying, from the early days of the REDD idea, and we have some experience under our belt, and there's a lot to say and opportunities of REDD Plus. So I was very pleased. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this event. But I did say I would focus my overview on the experiences we've learned from developing and supporting the use of social and environmental standards for REDD Plus. So I'm not going to go into a comprehensive overview of all the important issues like the political challenges related to ambition and finance, or the technical and also political challenges as we're seeing in the negotiations related to reference levels and carbon MRV, and I'm going to focus on safeguards and non-carbon benefits piece of the puzzle. So REDD needs to work and make sense at least 3 different levels. Obviously, it requires international agreement, a mechanism and framework for providing incentives and financing for reducing emissions from deforestation. It also requires policies and measures taken by governments. It needs things like national information and monitoring systems, and it also requires decisions, actions, leadership at the local community, smallholder and farm level, and the supporting framework at that level, including local government, NGOs, the commodity buyers. And the challenge is to get all these different interests to be mutually supportive to meet multiple goals at different levels. So all the actors see what's in it for them and keep motivated to participate. So I had a really, what I felt was an instrumental discussion with Saraswati Rodriguez. She's from Ecuador. She's now working on safeguards for the UN REDD program in Ecuador and leading the team that's designing Ecuador's safeguard information system. She has a wealth of experience on community, natural resource management, and gender. And she said, we've been explaining REDD in the wrong way. We've been going into detailed explanations about climate change and how deforestation releases greenhouse gases, and we need to reduce it to help the rest of the world mitigate climate change, and there'll be lots of money from rich countries to pay us for this service. And what we should be talking about and explaining when we're talking, especially with local communities, but generally in our country, is explaining the importance in defining our own development objectives, identifying the pathways we could follow to improve livelihoods and well-being in a sustainable way, and then see REDD as an optional helping hand from developed countries, or the national government, or an NGO, or another intermediary, a private sector that can help the countries and the communities follow their own development path if they choose the pathway that reduces deforestation. So the challenge is explaining the complexity of REDD, but the opportunity is REDD as a means to multiple benefits. So, the 7 safeguards for REDD Plus agreed at the UNFCCC COP in 2010 in Cancun are a good summary of some of the key challenges for REDD Plus. Not for the international part of the equation, but actually for the country-level implementation. The challenge of coherence and consistency among different government initiatives, the challenge of ensuring that REDD Plus recognizes, respects, and secures the knowledge and rights of indigenous people and local communities, the challenge of enabling full and effective participation of all relevant rights holders and stakeholders, and things like the challenge of ensuring that REDD is not used for conversion of natural forests, but to protect the biodiversity and enhance social and environmental benefits. So I work on an initiative that develop standards, climate community, biodiversity standards, CCBA standards for project level initiatives, and REDD plus social and environmental standards for national or jurisdictional level. And they're designed for high social and environmental performance and the idea was to attract rewards and finance and create incentives for high performance. But we went to countries to talk about this initiative. The response we got from the developed country side was that safeguards are important and non-carbon benefits are really good, and they help us to build support from the public and channel greater funds to REDD+, but we can't go to developed countries and require higher performance, and that also could divert finance away from emissions reductions. And then we went to developing countries. They said, oh, well, it's obviously essential that our REDD program delivers multiple benefits, and we want to get high recognition, we want good recognition for high performance, but we don't want conditions added to financing and oversight from outside. So that risks us getting to a position of everybody, of going down to the lowest common denominator and no incentives for focusing on all the benefits from REDD. So the REDD Social and Environmental Standards Initiative, it supports government-led REDD+ national or jurisdictional programs with the development of a safeguard information system based on REDD, based on this initiative that includes content, principles, criteria, and indicators, and then a process for using a country-led multi-stakeholder process for using the standards at country level. As I mentioned, it's focused on showing performance enhancing benefits as well as avoiding harm. It's a voluntary initiative for countries wanting to demonstrate high social and environmental performance. And it's developed through broad consultation and supported by an international steering committee with representatives of governments, NGOs, indigenous peoples, community associations, and private sector. So our original hypothesis was that countries that demonstrate high social and environmental performance using best practice standards would be rewarded by improving access to finance or increased finance, and this would lead to adoption of the standards by others and a race to the top. And over the last 3 years of experience working with countries using standards, we'd adapted our theory of change as follows. So that in order for REDD to work and safeguards to be adopted and there to be high performance, there needs to be political support from government actors, there need to be policies, laws, and regulations and their implementation, and civil society engagement and trust between key actors through a process of constructive engagement, and we're hoping that this process of developing the safeguard information will create a process of constructive engagement and an incremental approach to improvement. So what have we discovered is that at the Exchange and Learning Workshop among the 14 of the countries that are using the REDD SES that we held at CIFOR's campus in Bogor in July of this year, we did an exercise where we asked country participants to identify any outcomes they've observed from the process of using the REDD SES. And that includes identifying safeguards indicators, consultations on indicators, creation of a multi-stakeholder committee to review and approve a performance assessment report. So we asked them about these key domains of change and give examples. And we got examples like in Peru, they said that the use of the standards has helped, or the development of the safeguard information system has helped with the empowerment and engagement of the regional government of San Martin in the regional and national REDD+ policies in Peru. It's led to changes in policies and legal frameworks in Tanzania, in Mexico, and in Ecuador, and led to the engagement of stakeholders like women and indigenous peoples who were not recognized as important before in places like Acre, Ecuador, and San Martin. And they've even reported some changes that are being observed from this safeguards process outside the REDD program, such as the government has started to talk about free, prior, and informed consent and safeguards that used to be taboo or hard to talk about in central Kalimantan. So what we're seeing is a shift in emphasis from the frustrations and mistrust caused by viewing the international REDD mechanism as an end in itself, to focusing more on the broader actions for sustainable development, including reduction in deforestation that makes sense at the national and local level, with REDD as one potential support mechanism for eligible actions. So we have another example of the shift in emphasis that we're seeing in some countries. So over the last month, we did a survey of some countries asking them what are their priority objectives for safeguard information systems. Is it to prepare a summary for UNFCCC? Are they doing it to provide information to their financing agencies or to the market or private sector? Or to provide information to national or local stakeholders? Or to improve their REDD program? So we've had responses so far from 10 countries, from Mexico, from Costa Rica, from Guatemala, Honduras, Ecuador, Peru, Acre in Brazil, Chile, Central Kalimantan, and Nepal. And while many of these said that their original motivation for starting to develop a safeguard information system for REDD+ was in response to the UNFCCC decisions, 7 of them said that their primary objective now is to report back to national and local stakeholders. And then the second priority is to provide feedback to improve the REDD+ program management. So just to conclude here, we're seeing that obviously REDD+ presents a range of significant challenges. And what we're finding is that some of these can be addressed through a transparent, inclusive, multi-stakeholder process to address safeguards, to monitor their implementation and use that information to improve the program. It's a way of bringing different stakeholders together, focusing first on what the risks are, but then leading on to what all the benefits can be, and then to build and generate political will for REDD+ in general. So safeguards and multiple benefits can also provide a key, I think, to shifting REDD from an international service to this opportunity to support locally defined development objectives. But obviously, while a shift to internal reasons to reduce deforestation with effective safeguards is really important, to reach the full potential, we still need the international carrot, the finance and ambition from developed countries. And I'd actually written this slide and said what I wanted to say, and then I heard Pakeru say exactly the same thing, that we need the international carrot from REDD to make the switch, to catalyze to this new development pathway. And just wanted to let you know some of the people involved in the program. It's not on that slide. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Joanna, stay there first. We'll allow a couple of clarificatory questions. Clarificatory questions are simply questions that where you would like to have expounded a bit or explain a bit some things that Joanna said, but please limit yourself to that. If it's more of a commentary or an opinion or an exchange of ideas, we would like to postpone that to a later stage in today's event. Yes, please. There are mics. Where are the mics? It's over there.
Hello, I'm Cecile Schneider, working for Conservation International, who actually is in charge of the project, the REDD+ project in San Martin. And I just wanted maybe if you could expand a little bit on what were the actual changes that the CCBA standard led to. So you said you're talking about policy changes after the arrival of the standards, if I understood well. So maybe you could just expand a little bit on what was exactly changing.
Okay, are you talking about specifically in San Martin, or?
Yeah, in San Martin, or in like in a specific case study.
Yeah.
Because so you were talking about the 4 pillars, and so how this could actually be translated concretely in I don't know, a project you know of, or.
Okay, well, I can't go back to the slide, but I think you're referring to the slide where I talked about the kinds of impacts that the different country programs are seeing from using REDD SES and the Safeguard Information System. So it was an exercise that we did, and I think there's even a person in the room who was at the event where we asked people, have there been any changes in terms of policy changes or or government engagement in REDD+, or changes in stakeholder engagement, or building trust between stakeholders. And it was quite interesting, the rate at which these cards were coming in, and we got them to write on the back any examples they could give. And I remember one example from Tanzania was the inclusion of gender in the national, is it the REDD? National REDD strategy. Because over the last year, we did a program with the Women's Environmental and Development Organization on gender action research and how you could build gender into as you were going through the Safeguard Information System process. And that was one of the kind of policy outcomes from the sort of focusing on safeguards and safeguards issues. What they told us from San Martin was that going through this Safeguard Information System process actually helped them to get the regional government more engaged, both in the REDD process at regional level, but also in talking to the national government. And on our little brochure briefing note that I have a few copies at the back, there are some more examples.
Thank you. One more clarificatory question. If any, yes, Delphine. By the way, you always introduce yourself when you take the mic for the first time.
I'm Delphine Gnapin. I'm the global manager of the UNDP GEF Small Grants Program. We're trying to develop a community-based REDD+ program. And the debate has been which comes first. It's like a chicken and egg issue. Do you get the national readiness of the government first to accept all of these, or do you start immediately at the local level and develop procedures and mechanisms at the local level? What's the experience so far right now? Did you wait or did the case studies show that you had to wait for the national government to be ready, or we can start at the local level and help get the government ready by getting the local level to be ready and push for it?
I think what we're seeing is you need all those levels, and in fact our approach has been to engage government, but then very quickly to say that as part of this process you need to do it in partnership with civil society, right down to the grassroots level. So for example, we encouraged for the Safeguard Information System and using REDD SES, there to be a facilitation team that includes government and civil society. So every meeting that is held, it makes sure some of the key people from government come to that meeting, but also that civil society makes sure that the right networks are put in place to get information up and to get good participation from civil society and networks. And I think you can see these things working in tandem. So as there's more government engagement, there's more kind of involvement, and they can help to stimulate each other to be more effective.
Thank you. Let me now proceed with the next speaker for this morning. I will now ask my colleague, William Sunderlin of CIFOR, to summarize for us the CIFOR research on these challenges. We actually have a book. Are we giving out the book to everyone? Do we have enough copies there for everyone who wants the copy of the book? Or we have a book out there analyzing REDD+ challenges and choices. William?
Thank you, Tony. I'm going to be summarizing just a few of the findings of a study that began last December and that involved in-depth interviews with 23 REDD proponent organizations that are collaborators in CIFOR's global comparative study on REDD. Which we abbreviate GCS. GCS has been underway now for more than 4 years and has funding for another 3 years. The central question that was posed in this survey was, what are the challenges and opportunities in implementing REDD on the ground in terms of attaining carbon effectiveness and equity and cost efficiency and social and environmental co-benefits. And in particular, this study sought to get an in-depth understanding of the kinds of pressures that the forests are under, the institutional issues that the organizations are facing, the interventions that they are deploying, and where we went into particular depth was to identify and rank the challenges that they faced and to ask questions about what kinds of policy and technical solutions they envisioned to overcome the challenges faced. On this map, we have a list of the 23 collaborating organizations in GCS-REDD, in Module 2, which focuses on subnational initiatives, of which 3 are represented on this panel. And now to the findings. We asked the respondents of the survey to tell us exactly what kinds of pressures the forests that they are trying to protect are facing. The scale on the right is the number of proponent organization responses, and on the left is a rather detailed list of the kinds of pressures that they faced. The reason for me displaying this is not the details, but rather to make a general observation, which is that broadly, at the top of the list are pressures exerted by small-scale operators, illegal timbers, small-scale agriculture, small or medium ranchers. Whereas at the bottom of the table, where the answers are less numerous, that's where we find the larger players, plantations, large-scale agriculture, and timber harvester. But a take-home point for us was it does not mean overall that smallholders present the biggest threat, because the claims made on local forests by the big players tend to be vastly greater. We need to bear that in mind. We asked the respondents what kinds of interventions they are deploying. The scale on the right totals 23 for the number of respondents. And notice the color coding here. This is important. Blue is for those interventions that have begun, red those that have not yet begun, and green those that will not be done. I want to say something about each one of these items because it's important for our findings in this study. At the top of the list is restrictions on forest access and conversion, a negative incentive, a determination of which forests are going to be protected and taking action on that. Second is forest enhancement, which refers to increasing the forests on the landscape through afforestation and reforestation. And then 2 types of livelihood enhancements or supports to livelihoods and income. The first is non-conditional. In other words, there is no requirement that forests be protected as a condition for providing this, whereas the next one is conditional. And this, of course, is the heart of what REDD is all about, the performance-based incentive at the local level. Next, environmental education, by which we mean outreach to discuss with local stakeholders why it's important to protect forests and biodiversity, to talk about climate change, et cetera, et cetera. And then tenure clarification, which of course is very important in REDD. An observation I want to make about this is that these REDD projects are operating very much like integrated conservation and development projects, where the heart of ICDPs is this tandem between restricting access to forests and compensating for that with non-conditional livelihood enhancements. And this is no surprise because half of our projects actually have a long history on the ground predating REDD in operating as ICDP. We asked the question, among the interventions that have begun or are planned, which is potentially the most important for effectively reducing deforestation and forest degradation at your site? Notice the one that gets the most votes, that 9 of the 23 respondents said is important. Livelihood enhancements that are conditional. This is perhaps not surprising and in a way reassuring, because this is the heart of what REDD is supposed to be. But from another perspective, it is deeply disturbing. If this is meant to be the heart of what REDD is all about, and only 9 of the 23 said that this is the one that is really going to achieve the results desired, then we ought to be concerned. We asked the 23 respondent organizations to evaluate 62 different kinds of factors or challenges to implementation. We brainstormed a very detailed list of kinds of challenges relating to policy, whether international or national, forest or non-forest, governance issues related to tenure or to corruption or capacity, technical issues like MRV, and economic issues. And we asked the respondents to rate this factor on a scale of 1 to 5, from no effect, small effect, medium effect, large effect, and overwhelming. And upon processing this data, it really stood out that tenure is the largest challenge being faced by REDD subnational initiatives. The 5 tenure-related challenges are right up there at the top, occupying most of the top 10 positions. Second ranking is REDD economic policy and the disadvantageous economics of REDD currently, relating to the difficulty of REDD competing in a land use sense with other uses that can lead to forest conversion, the absence of a robust forest market for forest offsets. And rounding out the top 20 are challenges related to technical and legal policy of REDD, national forest and agricultural policy, governance capacity of various kinds, international climate policy, the engagement of stakeholders at the national level, illegal deforestation, and organizations simply finding it difficult to get the funds to keep on going. We asked, what are the national and international policy changes needed so that your project can fulfill its objectives? And here in this slide, the aim is not to sum up the findings because they are way too detailed to sum up here. Here I'm characterizing what the responses are like, because this is a finding in itself. It's notable that at the international level, there's almost a wholesale focus on discussing the problems of economics and funding, which resonates with what Joanna was saying about the importance of economics, and almost total absence of discussion of tenure, which makes total sense because tenure is essentially a national issue where you don't have recourse to solutions at the international level. A very strong theme was the need to make up for the deficiencies of the voluntary carbon market and to have arrangements that can help support REDD continue between now and 2020. At the national level, the responses are much more diverse, focusing on tenure, markets, and funding. The need to develop REDD plans at the national level of various kinds, whether they be strategies or plans or funding mechanisms, and on the importance of the jurisdictional approach. It was notable that among the responses, there's basically a divide between those who envision working more closely with government, recognizing the need to do so and the opportunity, whereas some others shied away from that and envision needing to be more autonomous from government support and action, reflecting in some cases the difficulties that they have had in working with local or national government. It's clear from this study that subnational REDD is in a very difficult situation right now. Dominating the challenges are policy and economic conditions that inhibit the movement towards what the essence of what REDD was meant to be when it came into being, namely a system of performance-based incentives. And regrettably, we have some evidence of, at least in our sample, of some subnational initiatives turning away from REDD. We asked the respondents, by 2015, what is the percentage chance that you see yourself as continuing to operate as a REDD entity? Reassuringly, 9 said that the chance was better than 90%, in some cases 100%. But worrisomely, 6 of them said the chances were somewhere between 50 and 70%, and 3 of them said 0 chance. So we do have some evidence of a turn away from REDD that we need to pay attention to. Now, in spite of all of these challenges, proponents have moved ahead largely through an array of interventions that make them resemble what ICDP was doing for decades before REDD came along. And again, this is no accident. So in closing, I just want to say it remains to be seen if REDD can overcome these big challenges that are being faced on the ground and become not only ICDP, but what was originally aimed, which was for it to be something fundamentally better and different from ICDP, so that it could achieve what REDD set out to do when it was introduced 6 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Before I open the floor for a couple of questions, clarificatory questions again, I have to apologize to William. I wasn't able to introduce him properly in the eagerness to listen to his presentation. William, as I found out yesterday, has been with CIFOR for quite a lot of years, almost from the beginning. He's a principal scientist in the livelihoods portfolio and CIFOR, working mainly on the underlying causes of deforestation, well-being, and rights. And in the last 4 years, he has led the module in CIFOR's Global Comparative Study on REDD Plus concerning subnational initiatives. Can I open the floor now to a couple of clarificatory questions? Okay, Joanna has a question. Clarificatory, Joanna, not a debate.
Yeah.
No, just a question, just clarification. You said that, sorry, can you hear me? Yeah. So you said that some of the projects or the people involved are turning away from REDD, but are they turning away from REDD as a financing source, or are they actually stopping their activities to reduce deforestation?
Okay. It's quite a variety. One thing that's reassuring is that none of them, with the possible exception of one, is actually turning away from their efforts to stop deforestation and degradation. Instead, they are pursuing different approaches, which involves simply continuing what they've been doing for years and in some cases decades. In some cases, turning to a low-carbon economy approach. And I believe Renato is going to be telling us about that. But yeah, reassuringly, in brief, all but one of those that are turning away from the name REDD are continuing their forest protection efforts.
Thank you, William. Anyone else? Yes, please. Mike, please.
My name's Mark Merrick. I'm from a Dutch utility called Ateneo. And I don't know how many people in this room actually represent the buying community, but I suspect not many. And that probably encapsulates the problem that you've just been outlining in your presentation a little bit. Because the beautiful REDD projects which are getting done now are obviously being done for the voluntary sector. But they are, compared to the alternate economic land use, they can't really push out some of the important alternative land uses because of the low price of VERs. And so we're caught in this circle whereby if you sort of say, well, we really need to get some value into REDD, and can we somehow bring it into some sort of compliance regime whereby companies are required to perhaps offset some kind of ecological footprint and therefore put some value into REDD credits, but then the sort of more non-scrupulous complier will be perhaps looking at just the cheapest REDD project he can get, which won't necessarily be a great one, and then the whole approval of projects will have to become a lot more rigorous. So I think it's in a really REDD seems to be, from my side as on the private buying side, it's in a really difficult circle, and it's really difficult to see how to get out of it. And I wondered if anybody's got any really innovative ideas up there as to how this sort of dichotomy might be solved.
Regrettably, I would have to say that I am not aware of any brilliant ideas, and there is discouragement, although not total discouragement right now. There's high dependence on the idea of going to the voluntary market, more enthusiasm for the compliance market, in spite of the fact that that is elusive. Deep awareness that REDD right now is heavily dependent on the shift towards public sector funding and the donor largesse. Some awareness, for example, at a couple of our project sites in Brazil, that even that is not sufficient to meet their goals, and therefore there needs to be a diversity of approaches. But the forest carbon voluntary market, in spite of the fact that it has been growing unevenly in recent years and is currently on an upward swing, is infinitesimally small against the donor funding stream right now. And partly because of this turn towards the jurisdictional approach and a shift recently of public sector funding in that direction, some of the demonstration or projects are suffering even more because this funding that has been there for readiness is less available now, because more of that is going to the jurisdictional approach.
One more, please, just a clarificatory question.
Thank you very much. I'm Andrea Tuttle from California, and I have been engaged with, from the very beginning of the development of the California forest offsets, and now, as you know, we've moved into a compliance trading market. And I come to the COPs, and I've watched the development of REDD from the very beginning also. So I was going to hold this question, but we just opened it up. So let me propose it. The overarching question is CIFOR, CCBA, VCS, the traditional sort of thought leaders in REDD have done a fabulous job in developing all the mechanisms and standards and policies, you know, all the papers that we have. We've done a good job there. But nobody is educating all these stakeholders, national, international, and on the ground, grassroots, on financial aspects, the market side of how it actually works. And therefore, it's a mystery. There's a lot of misunderstanding about how markets work. Let me just say that in the California system, there are very strong safeguards on how you buy an allowance, how many you can hold, the standards. It's a big piece, is the safeguards on the financial market side. Mm-hmm. And we're not getting that piece of the education out, and therefore I think a lot of stakeholders reject markets, you know, all the arguments there. And so I'm always stuck. Who is it that's going to provide that side of the education for our whole REDD? Here you've just identified very clearly they're turning away because the markets, you know, the market level is the part that's not developing yet.
Yeah.
So AIDA, for me, AIDA is the closest organization that says anything about markets. But I think we need to get this conversation going so that people have more confidence. Just like we built in social safeguards, now we need to build in the financial safeguards.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'll ask you to hold off that, sorry.
Okay.
But it's my first question, I promise, in my panel discussion, because I think that's a very important question. I think everyone should actually, in the panel, might have something to say about that. So if you don't mind, I'll hold that. Let me go now to the next set of presenters, which are going to be very interesting because their underground experiences will be shared with us. And the first speaker that we have is our colleague from Brazil, Renato Farias. Dr. Farias, quite young, 39 years old, has been a resident of Alta Floresta in the extreme north of the state of Mato Grosso in the Brazilian Amazon, living there for 34 years. He's a biologist, a professor, executive director of the Cristalino Ecological Foundation, and has worked on REDD pilot project for Northwest Mato Grosso. So he really has underground experience that he can share with us. So Renato, we start with you.
Thank you. May I broke a protocol in the stand? Great, thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank and for this great invited by William and Amy. I'm just apologize for my English, not so good. Sometimes I need some help. Amy, please, some translate because I'm still learning English. Okay, well, I'm from Brazil. I'm from Alta Floresta regions and the Amazon area, and we work in the project in the Cotirguaçu area. I stay here to show for you some process that you development there, and the initiative, the Cotirguaçu Sempre Verde, okay? Well, the first one is the region of REDD initiative in Mato Grosso, in that region. Well, Mato Grosso in Brazil, it has an Amazon area that has a huge area, of course. And Mato Grosso is a huge state. In that state, we have biomes, and one of them is the Amazon area. In that Amazon, we have several people from the different parts of Brazil, and the people, not people from Amazon, but people came to there. Okay. In that moment, Mato Grosso state has a high level of deforestation in 2007 until the 2003, 2007. In that moment, the governor of Mato Grosso is the highest producer of soybeans of the world, Blairumage. And in this moment as well, the governor with the partners thinking about how to create some ideas of how to create some project to avoid deforestation, to change the image or change the scenario of the Mato Grosso. And REDD appeared like a good strategy. In that moment, governor asking or looking for the NGOs to work together, like ICV, TNC, and Mato Grosso governor. In that moment, they are prepared to show the initiative in COP in Copenhagen. In that moment, REDD is a lot of discuss. And discuss is thinking about payments. Think a lot about money to maintain the forest. And in this moment, ICV is an NGO from Mato Grosso, 20 years old, to work in the ground in north of Mato Grosso region, and to work in the capital and to work on all the state. We focus in the northwest of Mato Grosso region. It's a region that's most area of the forest there. It has more than 8% of forest yet. It's a huge diversity of stakeholders there. Indigenous area, medium, large private properties, has settlements, and have a lot of people, and have previous investment in sustainable development initiatives as well. So in that moment, we look for the Northwest and think, well, could be a space to work in the REDD project, and could be a work. It's a huge area, so necessary to focus in the one municipality or one something that represent something like that happens in northwest of Mato Grosso. And we're looking for or invited to work in Cotriguaçu. Well, there's a light here or not to point or not? Do you know have light here to point? No? Okay. I will point to my... So in this municipalities represent the things similar happen in northwest of Mato Grosso. We have the green ones, a protected area. We have, oh great. How much is it? No, sir. Well, it's a green area, the protected area. We have the blue ones, the areas to registration, the state to management plans in the forest. We have here's count, not a pure here, but the urban area. It has a yellow one, it's settlements here, and it has in the middle, in the heart, indigenous areas. So this will really complete and represent a little bit of what happens in north of Mato Grosso. In that moment, the same moment at the COP in Copenhagen, we start a project there. In that moment, we talk about the payments. When we realized that diagnose in these different areas there, we work almost 2 years. We waiting, and the people, and talking about it, to waiting, well, we now, finally, we have money to maintain the forest. Wow, it's a great idea. When it has several meetings with the governor of Mato Grosso, to talking about it. But after Copenhagen, the things not so clear. The things not happened immediately. The things is necessary to wait a little bit. But how to discuss with the people in ground that necessary to wait a little bit, and how to discuss that REDD not only payment, but people wait for payment, waiting for money. So we stay at the ground. We try or to start to move the ideas, or try to move this idea. So with this diagnosis, we build a project called Cotriguaçu Sempre Verde. This project looked and discussed with different stakeholders, thinking about, well, how can I to work in the municipality, and how can I not to speak about payments or not to speak about REDD in this moment, but we create a project and they create a huge objective to promote a new trajectory for social and economic development for Cotriguaçu based on conservation, sustainable management, and natural research. But how to discuss this to people thinking about the payment, thinking about not possible to short payment this moment after diagnosis or after Copenhagen. And another one, how to involve all stakeholders in this object. Well, it's a huge challenger. But we start the path that we use to activity by demand. So we stay there. We created a group, we created a team that live to work in UNFCCC to think in 5 components. The components discussed with the group of stakeholders there. We're talking about municipality governor to development environmental management capacity there. Talking with loggers, we're talking with cat rangers, we're talking small farmer, is talking in indigenous groups. But more than talk, we start to work with them. Okay, it's easy? No, I'm not sure the word is sometimes it's terrible, but it's really difficult to work with them. And we use two main strategies to address these demands. The first one is preparing our team. Why prepare our team? Because in our team, the different perception about the development. The people that work with indigenous, the professional that work with indigenous, is different than the professional that works with the cattle rangers. The people that work with the governor is different, the thinking, the ways you think the people that work with the settlements. So the first stage, you have several meetings in the parallel with the developmental project to discuss how we can work in the ground. And the second strategy is to working with the stakeholder separately until we get concrete results in the ground. We work in this for 2 years. More than these concrete results to relate it with the trust as well. Because we don't take, we didn't talking about payments, but we talking about the activities in the ground. So necessary to create a situation that shows that the things that could happen. Well, after 2 years, we don't like to talking about results. We'd like to talking about the process that going to. Because the result is some things about numbers. You don't like talking about numbers. We're talking about, we like to talking about the process. Well, Contribuação Sempre Verde, well, the first stage, we have a active council. The council is a place that we have different stakeholders to discuss together about the future of Contribuação. We have now the city has a project approved in the Amazon Fund. It's happened now, almost $2 million to work with the municipality there. We have all owners of timber management plans in the program. We have first cattle property of Mato Grosso certified units implement, and we have small farmer new economic activities implement, indigenous group territorial management. Why I want to show for you, of course I don't have time to everything, but the main one is a process to building the municipality agreement with committed to zero illegal deforestation. This is the way, this is the process we're building now. And we have some key messages about it. Well, first one, need to prepare team internally to work with different stakeholders groups that I said for you before. Work to cultivate trust of local stakeholders. Zero illegal deforestation agreements in Contribuação is a consequence. It's really important. It's not a final one and discuss, we start with working this group. It's a consequence of a new territorial management model and not the initial objective. Municipality better prepared for REDD. When you really work with these groups in pass of time to prepare to discuss about REDD. Now, maybe now a time to discuss about the process. Well, the REDD process has this time, and this time. Now, after 2 years. But we have still, of course, in the final question, maybe the big one is this sufficient to maintain forest standing in the region? We try to answer this question because the business usual is so strong, it's so power, and we're talking about a city, a municipality with 80% of the forest and the arc of deforestation in Brazil. It's completely difficult. It's not possible to say or to discuss with the people of this situation about payment or talking about REDD. It's necessary to understand why the deforestation happened, and necessary to prepare to discuss with, necessary to involve stakeholders in this. So we try create a vision for the future. It's another thing is important. The project's not ICV project. Necessary that it's a local project. This idea is to continuous work with the local ones, not from ICV. Okay? So I'd like to thank again Renato Farias. I'm still here. Thank you.
Thank you. Renato. Any quick questions to Renato? Yes, please.
Renato, thank you for that. It's very interesting. I just want to ask you something quickly as a Brazilian, because this morning the BBC reported that Brazilian government's reporting an increase after years of a decrease in deforestation of 28% increase in deforestation since August 2012 to July last year. And they're saying activists are putting this down to a controversial reform of the forest protection laws. Do you know anything about this reform, and can you tell us anything about it?
I'm not sure if you understand. Yeah, the deforestation in Brazil sometimes happens in some specific years, election years, and when things is doubt, and the forestation code. Forest code is a thing that making some doves in the agriculture and deforestation in these areas growing. Specifically in Costa Iguaçu area, we don't have the big deforestation there now, but it's not a common thing. Could be changed, but maybe our preoccupation, our concern or worry the future, the next year, because election again. So this is.
Any additional question for Renato? If not, let's go on to Charles Meschak. Charles is the Executive Director for the Tanzania Forest Conservation Group, joining it in 1996 to work in Lulanda Village in Mufindi District as a program officer. Charles is known as a dedicated advocate for forest and conservation and greater rights for communities in natural resources management, has been at the forefront of forest conservation in Tanzania. Charles?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Tony. So I'm Charles from Tanzania. So I want to share with you some of our experience related to our project, the experience of Tanzania Forest Conservation Group and UMITA, the Community Forest Network. So we have a project, a 5-year project, which is funded by the government of Norway. And as I mentioned, there's a partnership project between 2 NGOs, TFCG and UMITA. And we work on 28 communities. Some, I think these are the 2 sites. So there are about 10 here and about 18 in this side. And the total area which we are talking about is more than 170,000 hectares, and it is located in the two biodiversity. So this initiative is part of the REDD phase 1 in terms of preparing the countries to learn from on how you could reduce the deforestation on the ground. So there have been other initiatives in the country like UNRED building the capacity at the national level, but also funding of the Norwegian preparing the national REDD strategy as well as the action plan, and also the development of the REDD safeguard in the country. So this is part of the initiative in the country which are taking place. So the pilot project is just one of them, and there were about 90 pilot projects, and I will only share with you the experience of my project. So basically, our model is looking at reducing emission from deforestation and forest degradation in a way that can direct and equitable incentive to communities to conserve and manage forest sustainably. So that is the goal. And what we are trying to do is to demonstrate at a local level what kind of interventions we could introduce to reduce the emission at the local level. At the same time, these people can get the incentive. So there are some key strategies which we employed as a project, which included selecting the sites based on the historical deforestation rate, stakeholder interests, and also the biodiversity criteria. So we had to undergo a consultative process with these communities, which is a free, prior, and informed consent with the participating communities. Thereafter, in a participatory way, we developed the strategies to reduce deforestation. These included the community-based forest management, and that is participatory forest management, land use planning, agriculture, improved agriculture, and other livelihood activities. And we are following actually the methodology to verify the emission reduction according to the voluntary carbon standard and the CCBA standards, and the channel revenue back to the communities initially using project funds. So in the project, we had this money set aside to test the payment. Once the communities have accepted to undergo or to conduct some interventions which can lead to reduce the deforestation. Some of the challenges which we encountered or were encountering in achieving our goal, including achieving the goals of reducing deforestation and improving rural livelihood simultaneously, requires consultation and participatory approach to planning and implementation, which takes time and skilled facilitators. So this has a lot of challenges, especially how do you communicate REDD on the ground, and what does that mean at the local level in the absence of international agreement, because it was so difficult to communicate while we are not sure whether the fund is there at the global. And I think that is why William is insisting that we have gone developing the ICDP's approach. It's just because to be in a safe side, because you can make a lot of promise at the end of the day, this fund is not there. So some of the skills necessary to implement strategies that will reduce deforestation, such as promoting conservation agriculture, were not available locally at the project outset and have required building the capacity of local government and other stakeholders. And also changing rural communities' behavior takes time, and if even a small minority continue with business as usual, rates of deforestation may not be reduced. So in some areas, actually, because communities depend on their livelihood on forests, they are depending on the forest. So it has been also difficult for those people to stop using forests because of limited alternatives. And the project has quite invested a lot to clarify land tenure, and I think this is one of the findings from William, that land tenure is key to clarify before embarking on the REDD process. And in some way, this has also created some conflict, because some villages were residing in other villages. So when at the time of conducting land use, we found that some villages were residing in the other part of the villages, which they are not part of them. So slowly, that also created like a bit of conflict. But also there are conflicting national policies on REDD and agriculture in Tanzania. Now we have a campaign on big results now, and is aiming at one of the strategies aiming at introducing commercial agriculture, and there we earmarked more than 300,000 hectares for commercial agriculture. So this is contrary to the REDD national strategy and action plan. For communities to choose to maintain forest cover beyond the REDD readiness phase, so communities need to receive financial benefits that are sufficient to incentivize behaviors that do not result in deforestation. and the price of carbon on the voluntary market is too low for this to make rational economic sense for communities. Basically, I'm talking on the opportunity cost, that if people are involved in charcoal, if they compare REDD money and the charcoal, if charcoal pays more, then they are likely to continue to do charcoaling. Yes, this is obvious. There is still uncertainty in national and international REDD policy because the agreement or the negotiation are still continuing, so we are not sure after the readiness where the funding would be coming from. So unless the national or the international community agree or reach a consensus on the architecture of REDD. Also meeting the MRV requirement for voluntary carbon standards is expensive and time-consuming, and the required skill set not really available in Tanzania. So this also, in our case, we have been doing this learning by doing, and we have been using the existing stuff in the two organizations. So we have been, the learning curve has been high, and that has taken a lot of time. But it was worth for us to understand all of these processes on how to develop the voluntary carbon standard rather than depending on the consultants. So what the project has done to overcome the challenges. The project has established the performance-based model for REDD, which channels revenue from the voluntary market directly to the communities as stakeholders in the community REDD enterprise. So this basically, we have created a wide community approach whereby communities residing in the villages receive dividends, including women, children, and the men. They all are eligible to get funding from REDD. And this has actually reduced has increased the governance or accountability, and also has reduced the elite capture. Also, adapting a participatory approach to planning and implementation, and remaining committed to free, prior, and informed consent. So this is quite important, especially communities. The issue of WebPIC is a continuous process. It's not just one event. So that has to continue. Also involving multiple stakeholders in the beginning and the implementation of the project interventions and the building their capacity to engage in REDD. So we have worked with the many different stakeholders, including the government, researchers, and in one way or another in the project site we speak similar languages. So communities have demonstrated their ability and the willingness to reduce emission from deforestation and forest degradation. It is now time for the international community to demonstrate their willingness to pay for REDD by paying communities who reduce emission at a price that fairly reflects the opportunity cost and the transaction cost of not converting forests to other land uses. So that would be my key messages. But the other one is agriculture policies are needed that support small-scale farmers to adopt more sustainable and profitable agriculture that does not require forest clearance. And also there should be a need for REDD readiness support to help communities to engage with REDD in ways that bring them really livelihood benefits. And the MRV is that should be accessible at the scale of individual communities within a national level greenhouse gas accounting mechanism. Thank you very much, I think.
Thank you, Charles. Do you have any questions, clarificatory questions to Charles? Yes, please.
Thank you very much for a very nice presentation. I'd like to ask about, you said that we need to involve multi-stakeholders during the the design and the implementation of the project. Regarding the MRV, that you also put the MRV in the challenges, do you have a plan or a design to also involve local community in MRV process, or how to deal with the issue? Thank you.
Yes, the plan is there, and our project, at a national level, there have been a project called INAFORMA, the National Forest Inventory, which was developed a methodology on how to do carbon mapping. And what we did, we introduced that system into the village level. So our project staff received training at the national level. Then we used that methodology to train the communities on the ground on how to measure carbon and basically data collection with the communities. And the reason why we did that, it would be also possible to feed that kind of data at the national level when the national system becomes ready.
Any other question? Yes, Delphine.
Charles, just an explanation, because I wasn't really very sure how you set up the payments. Did you wait for a voluntary market to be available to provide the payments, or did you set up a fund from the Norway financing that could initially provide payments while you wait for a voluntary market to come in? And then how did you try to set up the sustainability of the reduction of carbon emissions to assure markets or your project that what has been started would not be reversed?
Mm-hmm. Thanks for the very good question. Basically, there in the project there was a fund which was set aside to test trial payment, but following exactly the voluntary carbon methodology. So the aim is that once the project ends, communities can still receive funding from the voluntary carbon market. So the trial payment which we tested was actually based on the community's acceptance on the minimum interventions or the plan which they are putting in place to reduce the emission. So we calculated the historical deforestation rate for each village. We identified the drivers of deforestation, and we developed a strategy. How can we reduce the drivers so that we can? How can we reduce the deforestation based on these drivers? And the key drivers were actually shifting agriculture and charcoal. Those were the main ones. But at the same time, the overall driver is poverty, actually. That is why you have the other livelihood activities. So we have paid them based on just accepting having the plan. But now the next payment would be now based on the actual reduction. And also the price which was used was actually a very conservative price. That is between $5 to $10. That is which is available at the global market now. So we still use that price. So we are expecting maybe in the future, if there is more funding, maybe the price per ton might be higher. So, but the most important with this project, it has laid a foundation on the ground. Regardless where the money would come from, once that fund reaches on the ground, what would be the distribution mechanism? Whether that fund would be from the national fund mechanism, whether from the compliance market, whether from the voluntary carbon, but it's the system on the ground there so that the people can see the really benefits. And what we are saying, I think the investment costs, maybe that is why, because the land tenure or land use planning has nothing to do with the REDD, but it's very prerequisite action in terms of assuring reducing deforestation. And maybe this funding might not be available from the private sector to invest into these kind of activities like land use, setting up the activities which would now make REDD work. And that is why I'm saying donor funding or public funding should actually continue. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to proceed now to our last presenter, because I just realized we're now a little bit behind schedule. Let me now call on Wahjudi Wardojo. Wahjudi will talk to us about REDD Plus in Indonesia. He currently serves as a senior advisor for conservation policy in the Nature Conservancy in Indonesia and works closely with TNC's International Climate Policy team. he has quite a lot of experience in the area of forestry in Indonesia, and I think he can share a lot with us on what's happening there. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Good morning, everybody. Today I got a very good privilege because just me having opportunity to sit all other chairs in the podium except Tony's. I like to share with our experiences in our programs called Bureau Forest Carbon Program in Indonesia and East Kalimantan. Probably what I'm going to talk here is rather short compared to the previous speakers, because actually Bureau program already been presented in several occasions, and CIFOR and COP since in Copenhagen, and lastly in Doha with dealing with safeguards. But again, this is a good chance for us to share, and what we are going to share with you is dealing with what the CIFOR doing, led by William Sunderlin on a global comparative study on REDD+. First, I like also to say that the Bureau Forest Carbon Program is starting in 2008 with the basic idea, and the time is we are applying what we call no regrets policy. We are going to do something in the field dealing with what policy on REDD+ in international forum. And secondly, Bureau Forest Program actually is based on jurisdictional approach, meaning that the subnational programs with jurisdictional approach, mainly in district level or municipal level in some countries. This is why we use a jurisdictional approach, because this is we are going to try to minimize or to reduce conflict of land tenure in the field. Second, to reduce leakage issues, and lastly, to reduce the conflict of benefit sharing or rights of carbon later on. By jurisdictional approach, that we have opportunity to reduce that kind of problem later on. I start with showing why Bureau, or where is Bureau. Bureau is in East Kalimantan province, and this district covering the whole covering area is 2.2 million hectares, and the program is covering all of the whole district. 75% of district area was forested and threatened by logging, plantation, and mining. Net emission from deforestation and legal logging from 2000 to 2010 is around 10.4 million tons carbon dioxide per year. And our demonstration phase, we set from 2011 up to 2015 after 2.5 years preparation. And in 2010, this program already recognized by Ministry of Forestry as one out of 4 demonstration activities REDD+ in Indonesia. This is the main strategy implementation that we set up for Bureau programs. First, actually by doing a carbon accounting, and then to some extent we are going to get the REL. Of course, REL is not under TNC, but the TNC here is doing a kind of facilitator, designer of the program. The owner is the Bureau local government. First strategy is reducing emission from protection forests by doing better management and sustainable financial. And second is reducing emission from production forests. Production forest in this district is covering 50% of the total area of the borough. And we are doing to support concession, timber concession to reduce emission by applying reduced impact logging and carbon, applying high carbon value forests and certification. And lastly, we are going to do to support a plantation company to do a better siting, land swap, and also best practices. This is what I call is cross-cutting approach, because even we did a good job in site base, we need to do more dealing with the governance, capacity building, policy and legal framework, and also community empowerment and engagements to improve livelihood. And then forest carbon is for the goals of the forest carbon for 2015 is 800 hectares of forest land under effective management. And we are going to reduce emission up to 10 million tons up to 2015. It's just 10% out of 10 years emission in 2010. And then conserving critical watershed, protecting the habitat of 1,500 orangutans and other biodiversity, creating improved economic outcomes for local communities, and generating experience for national, regional, and global application. And in terms of governance, actually PFCP is set up since 2009. There was a joint working group from different institutions, from ministerial working group, provincial working group, and also district working group. Again, the NC is doing a kind of facilitator and designer of the program. The NC is not the owner of the program, actually. Pressures, the two big pressure now is large-scale plantation, both timber and perennial, such as oil palm. Oil palm is the most profitable business in land use in Indonesia. So it's one of the biggest pressure that we are facing. And second pressure is on mining, especially on coal mining. And there are the three different pressures: large-scale timber harvest, mostly done by timber concessions, and small-scale frontier agriculture, and usually is applied, slash, and burned by migrants or colonists from other provinces or other districts. And then lastly is small-scale traditional agriculture for Sweden by local inhabitants. Challenges that we are facing is there are two big challenges. First, issuance licenses that potentially lead to deforestation. Second, inconsistent commitment from district government, all linked to lack of financial incentive, because every time district government is asked of the incentives, and actually also lack of sense of ownerships. Another two challenges is limited resources and capacity of district government to manage forests effectively and enforce the law. And second, limited coordination among donors and implementers. For your information, actually, in Bro, there are a lot of donors coming to support Bro, but to some extent we have a big challenge how to coordinate among them. And then another challenge is lower capacity of local civil society organization at communities, not just in terms of management, but also in governance as a whole. And Lastly, inability for PSCP implementers to provide good estimate of overall benefits at the moment. This also is one of the challenges that we are facing, because everybody, when asked to us how big benefits that we can get from PSCP, so we don't have any exact number of economic benefits yet. Changes at national and global level in the futures, we actually expect that the Indonesia REDD Plus agencies will be operationalized. As probably you heard from Pak Heru several times, that Indonesia REDD Plus agency already signed by the presidents, and we are now waiting for the operationalization. And second, agreement on interim financing between now and 2020 for performance-based incentive and other incentive. Third, implementation of MOU is lead to more transparent licensing process in the local government. And fourth, advocate judicial approach, and so that the REDD Plus should be beyond carbon and beyond forest, because we believe that actually the source of problem of deforestation and forest degradation is from outside the forest itself. And then PSCP lessons learned are used for global negotiation and bilateral as well as multilateral cooperation. So we now is doing a support and facilitate the central government or MOU with provincial government and district level, and help creating appropriate financial incentive for district to support low carbon development. We are now implementing what we call 3 levels of incentives. First, what we call input-based incentives. Second, output-based incentives. And lastly, result-based incentives. Meaning that all of incentive will be based on performance. Although we are not waiting until the result of calculation or accounting of carbon for the last steps, but we are now providing input-based incentive for communities, for timber concession and others. Third, support strengthening of district government agencies through technical assistance and secondment, and help building the capacity of local NGOs and communities. This is what we are doing right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Odi. Any clarificatory questions directed at Odi? Yes?
Hello, thank you, Wahjudi, for your presentation. You said that one of the challenges you face is the actual inability for the implementers to provide good estimates of the overall benefits of the project. And I was wondering if, I think many times in the REDD discourse, we talk a lot about benefits, co-benefits, and benefit sharing, but the side of costs is sometimes, or most of the times, overlooked, I think. So I was wondering if this challenging has to do also with the difficulty of estimating costs, no? And the big question of how much actually REDD costs, no? If also you consider the big pressures that are outside of the additional investments of the project, such as agricultural policies or others. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, of course, as I mentioned, we didn't do a kind of analyzing on economics, benefit and cost or REDD Plus right now. Some of colleagues from New Zealand, University of Christchurch, now is doing that kind of analysis. But what we are doing now is, again, we starting with the no regret policy. But we confident if we do in betterment of the forest management, we can get more and more, not just for forest, but also for community, local communities, for even for the government on governance and also for timber concession for private sectors. So you are right that in terms of cost, we don't have any what do you call total calculation for that. But if you want to know how much it costs already spent in the borough, probably we can give information about that. But again, if we compare to what benefits we got, I think we don't have any exact number, because again, REDD Plus is one of the biggest challenges. REDD Plus also will be very difficult to compete with oil palm plantation operation, for instance, in terms of monetary terms. But in terms of economic terms, national economics or district level economics term, probably not.
Thank you. One more for Wahjudi? If not, let's have a few questions now directed at the panel. I'll actually start with the markets question that was raised earlier. I mean, I think most of the panel probably would have something to say about that. I mean, would anyone like to comment on that?
I'll give it a try. The question, if I remember correctly, was focusing on the issue of the financing and the weakness of the voluntary carbon market and where to go to given this difficult situation. Indeed, it is troublesome to realize how many of the projects in our sample are aiming for the voluntary carbon market, and yet the weaknesses are many. The volatility of the market, the price of forest carbon dropped in recent years in relation to oversupply, among other problems. So the alternative is to continue to rely on the stream of donor funding, which I mentioned earlier is a precarious proposition, partly because at least now the volume of the funding is not sufficient from the point of view of many proponent organizations, and also because in some ways, as one of the people from the floor mentioned earlier, in some ways it operates at cross purposes with the voluntary carbon market, given that it aims to a diversity of co-benefits, which, as we've heard from the panelists today, is all to the good. But the carbon financiers often want a lean proposition that focuses heavily or narrowly on offsets of greenhouse gases. So let me be more brief and to the point, which is that we are in desperate need of a fix for the REDD financial situation. Implicit in the negotiations has been that this big hit ultimately needs to be the compliance market. And yet we are years away from that in a situation where, as you've heard, a large share of the proponent organizations simply don't know where to go to place their reliance on a system of funding that's going to be something that they can count on. So with trying to avoid being overdramatic, I feel that it is urgently necessary that something happen in the near term and not in 2020 to speed up the process of finding a reliable funding source, because the current trajectory, and one where right now in the current negotiations, my understanding is that there is not much hope that there will be a breakthrough decision on finance and markets, and yet there really needs to be in order for REDD at the subnational initiative level to proceed in a way that gives us hope
that it can produce what it was meant to.
Yes? Yeah. John first.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thanks. You know, I would agree with all of those comments, and also thank you for raising the issue. You know, I suppose I also wanted to cover this point that you made about how can you provide sufficient information to the people really at the sharp end, the people who are actually changing their way of life, and relying on these finances coming in. And I think we've seen some interesting examples. I mean, obviously I was trying to make the point, and we heard it from Brazil, that in some cases we're looking for ways that REDD can provide the kind of carrot or the incentive or the catalyst to move a whole system to a more sustainable approach, where you get these district management plans and green economic growth that still maintains forest. That would be ideal. We're not going to get there immediately. We even heard an interesting proposal, you know, from Tanzania, where instead of just paying communities directly, they're putting money into a community fund. And certainly I've seen many examples of projects where, for example, certainly in the agricultural space, the good example is the VI agroforestry project, where if you actually paid farmers directly the amount of funds that would come from the emissions reductions, they'd be getting just a few dollars a year individually. So individually, it doesn't make sense. That wouldn't offset any opportunity cost. But actually, if those funds go into some community level, and there's a lot of good discussion about how they should be used, they could go to extension workers who help to bring new agricultural technology in, or I think we had some other examples here of the ways that you know, funds for REDD can be used in a way that helps to transition to something that then actually makes sense. So in fact, the farmers in Tanzania are not only relying on, you know, daily or annual payments to feed their children, but actually the new farming practices or the new businesses or enterprises that are put in place are the things that actually provide the livelihood. And you're using REDD as a transitional or catalytic thing to overcome barriers. And of course, you know, the point I think I made earlier and others have made, and it came up again and again, was that actually REDD is a way of getting governments to pay attention. It's a kind of international incentive that's coming from outside. I think Charles mentioned this point about one of the challenges or one of the solutions would be to change some of the agricultural kind of incentive systems or you know, subsidies, or change the way that that the sort of government frameworks are set up to help transition. And so I think this is one of the interesting opportunities we have with REDD is this kind of motivation for governments to actually change the policies and frameworks and incentive systems for moving to a more sustainable and low deforestation trajectory.
Yes, I'd like to add what William already mentioned. The position of REDD Plus compared to other approaches, especially ICTP or in forestry, we know sustainable forest management. We also applied PES, payment for environmental services. And to our experiences, although there are a lot of weaknesses on REDD Plus issue, but for us, there are some great opportunity for REDD Plus compared to other approaches. For instance, first, dealing with the accountability of methodology. By REDD Plus, we use carbon as kind of a criteria indicator of success. When we apply ICTP, a lot of criteria indicators set up. And then if we apply sustainable forest management, a lot of set of criteria indicator is much more subjective to consider. And then secondly, dealing with the incentives and other approaches like ICTP, SFM, or PES, they don't have a clear incentive step approach. In REDD+, we have big opportunity to apply what we call input-based incentive. Whenever we start to work with communities, with concession, and second, with output-based incentives, and lastly, with result-based. And lastly, is other approaches just probably more focused inside the forest. By REDD+, we have to do outside the forest as well, dealing with governance, dealing with community, dealing with benefit sharing, land tenure, and so on. That's why I think we have to think about REDD+ in a better way. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. If possible, it's something that's addressed to a number of the panelists, so yes.
Actually,
it's okay. It's just
Jill Blockhus from the Nature Conservancy. It's actually a question to William, but it could apply to everyone on the panel. I was thinking as one of the lead researchers on the global comparative study that CIFOR has been working on, and you're about midstream in terms of the findings. What, other than the market issue that we just talked about, do you find your expectations 3 to 4 years prior when you were planning? What has really surprised you that has either emerged as something very positive or something very, very challenging? And that could apply certainly to other people on the panel, but specific to what the research questions were from the outset and the premises and your ideal scenarios. Just curious, what's changed?
I can be very specific about this. When REDD was getting underway, the NGO sector was chanting, no REDD without rights. And what we see in the results is that the proponents are basically saying this. It's ironic because an NGO position was skeptical that proponents would take this on board. I'm not surprised at all, partly because I'm aware that most proponent organizations have a strong ethical mandate in their postures, including TNC, of course. But what's interesting from a research perspective is that ethics has overall fairly little to do with why proponents are taking tenure so seriously. It has a lot to do with business. If the aim ultimately is to depend on the market, and if you can only have this performance-based system work if you identify the legitimate right holders and responsibility bearers for keeping forests standing, then it makes total sense that this is a priority, all the more so when you understand that forest lands in developing countries are conflict-ridden and places where contestation over land rights are being played out and changing right now. I mean, this is a momentum over centuries of exclusion of people from being allowed to feel like they have rights to forest lands and resources. It's a context in which throughout the developing world, over the last 40 years, there's been a trend towards devolution of rights, but very uneven, very incomplete, and this bears directly on the possibilities for REDD realizing its potential. And not at all sites, but most of them, you have heavy tenure challenges, and there's a direct connection with the financial situation in various ways. The tenure mechanism must be resolved in order for the performance-based system to work, but more importantly, at most of our villages where we're studying REDD and tracking it over the years, at 2/3 of these villages, you have external claims on local forests, which unless that issue is dealt with up front, then you have no hope for stable REDD. And tenure clarification is the key to that.
Thank you. Would anyone want to add to this? Okay. We have time for a couple of short questions.
Yeah, actually it's quite in line with what was just said. So we've heard a lot about the challenges of REDD+, including land tenure, but also governance, including corruption, etc. And I think that REDD+ will have a hard time resolving these large challenges that are actually mostly internal. On the other hand, we've heard that in Brazil, for example, there's already the existing Amazon Fund. There are very strong regulation on stopping illegal deforestation in the 30 municipalities that deforest most. So we have this broad set of existing policies, existing finance. So maybe it seems like a basic question, but what is the actual added value of REDD+ according to you on the panel? Because I feel like this is something that is not totally clear in the international community, which maybe also contributes to the difficulty of finding an agreement on REDD+. So maybe if you could just bring some elements of response. Thank you.
Who would like to respond to that? Charles?
Yeah, maybe for me, I can try. I think the added value for, in addition to the existing policy, countries have gone ahead to reduce deforestation. They're trying to set up strategy to reduce deforestation. And the international community, if you do it as an individual country, I think it doesn't bring much impact at the global level. So even if you select one country to do conservation, at the end of the day, the other countries are deforesting. The impact is so minimal. But at the same time, the delay at the international community to agree on the REDD+ architecture, it creates a lot of risks and uncertainty, and that is why countries have come up with these innovative policies to come up with, either like Brazil have come up with the national fund to start providing incentive to the communities. I think it is the same thing with the national. So what we are expecting, I think, at least at the national level, there could be an agreement at the international level, which you could mirror at the national level. Because even the way you communicate REDD at the different levels, at the community, national, and the international, you have to be in a safe side. You can't promise something which you are not sure of. And that is why we have invested in these ICDPs, of which the Global Comparative Study is saying is a traditional. But it's not that traditional, because the ICDP is more of protected areas creating alternative. But this one is beyond the protected areas, because you are going beyond the boundaries of forests. You are going to people's farm. You are going to areas where you have to change people's behavior. Now, you need some kind of, it's not like SDP, but you have to think of how do you change the way you have been doing, like shifting agriculture. How do you maintain the same land, the same piece of land to increase either yield, at the same time you don't clear more forest, and or you don't change that forest. So this has to be built at a national level. But in the absence of the international architecture on REDD, it becomes so difficult to implement REDD. And sometimes I joke with William saying, what are the real activities expected from REDD+? What are the real activities if you say, if I do one, this is a REDD activity? Thank you.
Thank you. One last question or comment?
I have a totally different question.
Sure.
if somebody else would like the floor, that's fine. The numbers seem to be changing on the number of emissions from the forest sector now as compared to in the past. In the past, the estimate was 20%, and we could say it was equal to the transportation sector. And now that as fossil fuels and cement increase, now the relative emissions from the forest sector is down. Now we're using 10%. Is this going to change the drive and the interest in forests? Do you think we don't have the same? I mean, those of us in the forest community, of course, we say, yes, yes, it's important, but would you like to comment on that?
Yes, and make this also your last comments for all the members of the panel.
Okay. The brief answer is no. I don't think that this is going, the changing numbers are going to detract attention from the potential of forests to contribute very meaningfully to climate change mitigation. Why? Because irrespective of the numbers, forests are a critical part of the problem and therefore a critical part of the solution. The numbers are changing, but they've always been in question. Both the absolute contribution of the forest sector and the relative ones. They're kind of fudgy, but no matter what is said, it is key. And I'll try to end on an upbeat note because much of what I've said so far is sounding an alarm, and this is in partial response to your question and the one before it. The value added of REDD is a tremendous amount of attention to the well-being of people in remote rural areas, people who've been neglected historically. The poorest of the poor in most developing countries live in remote areas, which is where the remaining forests happen to be. And if there is a no regrets outcome from REDD, in other words, a good outcome that may not have been intended, but even if REDD fails to achieve what it set out to do, there are some tremendous benefits being generated through a large-scale rural development program that is providing a wide range of benefits. I've mentioned that there are business as usual interests that are in many ways the chief force that is undermining the attempt to achieve success in climate change mitigation. But at the same time, the good news, and Indonesia is a good window on this, is that even though Indonesia until recently was really an outlier in terms of access and ownership rights of rural people to forests, it's heading in the direction all of a sudden, really in the last 2 years, and as a result of REDD, towards changing its posture on ownership and access rights through the Constitutional Court ruling that happened May of this year, which practically overnight is laying the basis for indigenous people in Indonesia to no longer feel like they are trespassers in their own home. And a one-map process, a national initiative to resolve ambiguities in land use and in contestation over land use in Indonesia that I would say is a strong sign of hope that at least in Indonesia, that if the financing mechanisms in REDD can be sorted out, and given that Indonesia is making a very earnest effort at resolving the tenure issues, that at some point REDD could actually work in the way that it was intended.
Would you like to say something? Final, not necessarily on this, but just final word?
Yeah, I think it's, again, probably like William mentioned, that although still a lot of work need to be done for REDD+, but again, based on my experiences, this approach is much more comprehensive, not just been done by foresters people, but also for others. It is more comprehensive. This is big values of REDD+, because to our experiences, to face with the big challenge on forests, we cannot do by our own process on forestry sectors. It need to be intersectoral approach and need to have strong leaderships to do in a better land management. Thank you.
Yes, Charles?
Okay. In my case, I think the most important key areas which REDD has to is to get clarification or to invest into the addressing the drivers of deforestation. And depending on the nature of the drivers of deforestation, they have serious impact on different stakeholders, like the communities, especially who are depending on forest for their livelihoods. So in terms of creating alternative to reducing emission, then investment into addressing the drivers is key. But the most important thing, I think, is the payment, whichever comes, should be above the opportunity costs which the community will have to undergo, and also working with the different sectors to address the drivers. That would be also very, very important.
Thank you. Renato?
Well, I'm not sure if it's possible to pass in my speech about what happened in Mato Grosso, but it's really important to know that Amazon area is different Amazons in the Amazon. Mato Grosso is the case. Acre is different from Amazon of Mato Grosso, for example. And when somebody talking about the opportunities, REDD is great opportunity to work in that side. Amazonia Fund is help us. Our projects is REDD, but not talking about only payment, because we understand that necessary to work with the real demands happening in that space, to prepare for the future. In the future, it's necessary, it's important to know, not the future that NGO look, but necessary the future that people stay there looking for. And that people, not Amazon people in Mato Grosso, for example. The people came from other parts of the country. So this process, REDD could contribute, from the Amazonia could contribute, and our things that could create it together. The idea, the general idea here is really important to know that we try to create or try to build a vision, the concrete things. It's really difficult, but it's possible. We believe in it. So we think, William and Amy, when we're talking a lot of times about REDD, Couto de Iguaçu Sempre Verde is a REDD project or not a REDD project? Well, it's a REDD project, but REDD, looking for deforestation and looking for avoid deforestation with a consequence. The consequence of a process. It's really important to know. It's not REDD only thinking about we will stop deforestation. We will create path to try to avoid the deforestation in region that it's natural deforestation happen in the future. And we have a big challenge here. We work in a municipality, or we work in the region, have 8% of forest yet. Okay? We try it, and we'll go with our really challenger and the opportunity, of course, because the opportunity to show that it's possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you. John, I think you're the last.
I'll just take my opportunity to say one last thing. You know, will REDD go away? You know, I don't think so. I don't think politically there are so many different levels that are seeing benefits from reducing emissions from deforestation, but also, you know, changing the way development is done, bringing benefits right down to rural areas. Indigenous people are not going to let it go away because it's helped them wave their flag higher. and get some rights and tenure issues onto the table and get governments to take notice to that. So I don't think REDD is going, and it's great that there are some developed country governments that are really stepping forward and doing something and putting some finances and providing support in flexible ways. You know, Norway, Germany with the REDD Early Movers program, and others I hope will step forward too in a very similar way. There's a lot of money going into readiness, and it's really rung an alarm bell. It's shone a red light, and I don't think a lot of political reasons why people won't let it go off the agenda.
Good. Thank you. Let me just sum up with 3 words actually, and the first word is really simply the word success. I mean, I think that we've actually heard today some successes on REDD Plus in the ground, and we need to really build on that, because I think the success on the ground is the one which will eventually motivate also an agreement at the political level in the negotiations. We've had challenges in these negotiations, and that's actually my second word to summarize the discussion. Challenge. There's challenges on the ground, and that's actually reflected in the negotiations as well. I mean, the discussion here in markets, for example, is reflected on a regular basis in our negotiations on REDD Plus Finance, which actually is starting only today, so I can't update you on that. Actually, at the technical level, almost all the issues are being resolved, and I think it'll be resolved tomorrow evening, even things as difficult as verification. They're now on reference levels. The discussions in Substa now and in the contact group, in the drafting group, is already about who should be there and who are it's a question of trust now, and whether the developed countries and the developing countries can trust the experts who will do the technical assessments and who will do the verification. And I think we should have enough people, because of the work that you guys have been doing underground. There's enough people that we can have a pool for to do this technical verification. The third summary I would like, and I hope you'll forgive me as well because I'm from the Philippines, is the words that I will use with a big picture. I mean, we in the REDD space do sometimes think only of that space. I mean, and we do have to remember that the work on REDD is in the context, should be seen always in the context of the broader work on climate change and the broader work on sustainable development. I mean, I've worked on forestry myself for many years and worked on biodiversity for many years. But at the same time, having worked on climate almost in parallel, I've always had this urge of having to bring together all of this in a much more integrated way to be able to respond to both climate and sustainable development issues. And it seems like REDD Plus was a big area, a good area to be able to do that. I mean, I think given what happened in the Philippines in this last week, I mean, been very, very difficult for us in the delegation, but many of us have families actually affected, including myself. I mean, one ancestral hometown of my grandmother actually got destroyed. Decimated is the word that's used in this typhoon. But we've decided that we'll focus. I mean, some of us are fasting, including our lead negotiator, to get a just outcome, not on hunger strike, but fasting to be able to engage in a dialogue, meaningful dialogue with our negotiating partners. But the idea is we need to have progress on all fronts. I mean, and so in my case, it's in the area of land use that I will focus my attention on, as I've always done. I mean, and REDD Plus is part of that. So let me end by inviting you to tomorrow for the Global Landscape Forum, our first attempt to put together what used to be Forest Day and Agriculture Day, so we have a more integrated approach. Now, it will be held here in the afternoon, I mean, and you have flyers, I think, outside there for the details and the Global Landscape Forum. So on behalf of CIFOR and behalf of all the panelists here, thank you, and I think we have some lunch boxes available outside. Thank you.